That is not dead which can eternal lie, and with strange aeons even death may die. What is the Necronomicon? Well, the title Necronomicon has been translated in many different ways. It's been said to mean Book of the Names of the Dead, Book of the Laws of the Dead, Book of Dead Names, Knower of the Laws of the Dead. But S.T. Yoshi, a literary critic, novelist, and a leading individual in the study of H.P. Lovecraft, has stated that the name translates more accurately to mean book considering or classifying the dead. Now, the Necronomicon is a fictional grimoire created by H.P. Lovecraft that appeared in his stories as well as those written by his followers, such as August Derleth and Clark Ashton Smith. Now, it's interesting to note that Lovecraft approved of the inclusion of the Necronomicon by his fellow authors, believing that if it were continuously mentioned, it would create the illusion of being a real text. And his ploy worked, as many individuals today will argue, and some convincingly so, that the Necronomicon is in fact a real occult text that carries an awesome power. I ran into one website that even purports that Aleister Crowley has some connection to the Necronomicon. If you know anything about H.P. Lovecraft, you know that there is no way Aleister Crowley and H.P. Lovecraft would have ever worked together on anything. But Lovecraft himself claimed that the title Necronomicon came to him in a dream and that he invented it himself. But there have been suggestions from authors and scholars suggesting that he was influenced by other occult texts that he might have read and authors that he would have been introduced to during his lifetime. In a correspondence with a fellow author, Lovecraft himself wrote, "Now about the terrible and forbidden books. I'm forced to say that most of them are purely imaginary. There never was any Abdul al-Hazred or Necronomicon, for I invented these names myself. As for seriously written books on dark, occult, and supernatural themes, in all truth, they don't amount to much. That is why it's more fun to invent mythical books like the Necronomicon." Now, the author of the Necronomicon is said to be the Mad Arab, or Abdul al-Hazred, which, if you look into the grammatical structure of the name Abdul al-Hazred, you'll find that it's not correct. It's not a true Arabic name. Abdul means the worshiper or slave of. So standing alone, it'd make no sense. And al-Hazred is not a surname, but a reference to a place of someone's birth, like Boston being the name of where someone would have been born. So when we look at the name Abdul al-Hazred, it would basically translate to mean the worshiper or slave of al-Hazred, which is not a typical Arabic name. Now, Lovecraft himself first mentioned the Necronomicon in a short story that he wrote titled The Hound, but it was also mentioned in some of his other works, such as At the Mountains of Madness, The Case of Charles Dexter Ward, The Nameless City, The Call of Cthulhu, The Dunwich Horror. Now, in 1927, Lovecraft wrote a brief pseudo-history of the Necronomicon that wasn't published until after his death in 1938, that being the date of the published, not his death. It was titled History of the Necronomicon, and according to this history, The very act of studying the text is inherently dangerous, and those who do attempt to master its arcane knowledge generally suffer a horrible death thereafter, which, if you know anything of Lovecraft's works, you know is a common theme. Now, it's important to note that Lovecraft had a gift for taking facts and mixing it in with fiction. And throughout this pseudo-history that he wrote, he would mention real people, real places, and real occurrences, but add a lot of fiction, which really gave credence to the Necronomicon, which I believe is why some people today still believe it's a true occult text. Now, in this history of the Necronomicon, Alhazred is said to have been this half-crazed Arab who worshipped the entities Yog-Sothoth and Cthulhu, both of which are deities or elder gods that Lovecraft created himself. Now, Alhazred is described as being from Sana'a in Yemen, that he visited the ruins of Babylon, the subterranean secrets of Memphis, and the empty quarter of Arabia. And in his last years, he was said to have lived in Damascus, where he wrote the book, which he titled Kitab al-Azif, before he died a mysterious death in 738. Now, because he was worshippers of these two entities, because he visited the subterranean secrets of Memphis and he visited these ruins, this is why he becomes this half-crazed Arab, because within Lovecraft's works, it's knowledge of the unknown or this occult knowledge that makes the characters insane or mad or crazy. So the history continues saying that the book was secretly circulated among philosophers of the age and was translated into Greek in 950, and that's when it was given the title Necronomicon. And this new version or this new translation included information that compelled those who read it to begin experimenting with what was described in the texts. And in these experiments, it would lead to these terrible ends or these mysterious disappearances. The book was then said to have been suppressed and even burned in 1050. And it was when these books were burned that the Arabic version had disappeared. Now, it gives this mystery to this Necronomicon, this history, and which is hard to prove, but also hard to disprove. And that's where that possible reality lingers. So the history continues with, after the attempted suppression, the text was only heard about until it was translated from Greek to Latin, and both of the Greek and Latin texts were banned by Pope Gregory IX in 1232. Real person. Though Latin editions were apparently published in the 15th century in Germany and in 17th century Spain, and then there was suggestion that a Greek edition was printed in Italy in the first half of the 16th century. Understand, this is all made up history by Lovecraft, but it sounds really convincing, doesn't it? So then in the history, it's described that this Elizabethan magician, John Dee, you may know who he is, allegedly translated the book, presumably into English. So it's John Dee who has been credited in this pseudo-history for taking the Greek and translating it into English. But this version was never printed, and only fragments survive. There were also rumors of a secret copy appearing in San Francisco, California during the current century. Now, interesting about this little piece of pseudo-history is that the current century doesn't really refer to what century that is. Was that the century that this history was written? Was it the century that the history was published? Was it the century that you, the reader, are reading about this history? It's very vague. Again, this vagueness lends to some possible credibility. Now, this English version that John Dee translated was said to have been burned in a fire. So we can't track it down, right? Now, the Greek version was not heard about until, and I'm quoting here, since the burning of a certain Salem man's library in 1692. So here, this is a reference to true occurrences, the Salem witch trials in 1692, but also a reference to another piece of Lovecraft's story, the case of Charles Dexter Ward, in which the character of Joseph Curwen is mentioned to have owning a copy of the Necronomicon. So here Lovecraft was taking a piece of true American history and mixing it with some history of his own, with his own story of the case of Charles Dexter Ward, and complete fiction, which, really, again, he has this gift of taking truth and mixing it with fiction to make the reader believe that, hey, this might just be a real occult text. Now, according to this history, the pseudo-history that Lovecraft wrote, the Necronomicon, the original copies of the Necronomicon, are held by 5 institutions worldwide. Now, he's saying that these are still in these places. So the British Museum, which is a real place, the Bibliothèque Nationale de France, which is the National Library of France, which is a real place, the Widener Library of Harvard University, again, a real place, the University of Buenos Aires, a real place, and the Miskatonic University, which is said to be in Arkham, Massachusetts, which is a fictional place. It is a university based on Brown University in Providence, Rhode Island, that Lovecraft created. And Arkham, Massachusetts, is based on Salem, Massachusetts. Now, he says that the Necronomicon, a copy, is held here, and it also has a Latin translation. So we have real place, real place, real place, real place, fictional place. He also suggests in his pseudo-history that other copies of the Necronomicon were kept by private individuals, one of them being Joseph Curwen, which you were introduced to in the case of Charles Dexter Ward. A copy is held by Kingsport. A copy is held by the narrator of the story, The Nameless City, and by the protagonist in the story, The Hound. Now, we don't have names for these because a lot of Lovecraft stories, he is the narrator. He says I, and the protagonist would be I, so we don't have names. But it's suggested within the history that Lovecraft created about this fake or this fictional occult text is held by these characters from his stories. Now, after Lovecraft's death, real-life publishers printed books titled Necronomicon, hoping to capitalize on his notoriety of his fictional stories and this pseudo-history and the popularity of this fake book. One of the most well-known versions of the Necronomicon was published in 1977 by an unknown author with an introduction by a man identified only as Simon. Now, this book is a mix of Middle Eastern myth. It has some references to Lovecraft's work and Aleister Crowley's work, and it's sort of woven together to create this story of this mad Arab. Now, if you're interested, you probably have seen this Necronomicon. You can find it on Amazon used for about $3 plus shipping, if you're interested. But the The best or the most well-written Necronomicon was written by Donald Tyson. And it was published in 2004, and it's called Necronomicon, The Wanderings of Alhazred. He also wrote the Grimoire of the Necronomicon in 2008. It was published. Now, both of these are generally said to have been closer to Lovecraft's vision of what the Necronomicon would look like. But Donald Tyson, has never claimed them to be anything but works of fiction, where that first Necronomicon that was published in 1977, the well-known one, is sort of suggested that it's the real Necronomicon. But it's a work of fiction because, as I've just explained, the whole Necronomicon is a work of fiction. So I'm going to end this video with a passage that is said to have come from the Necronomicon. It was created, this passage was written by H.P. Lovecraft, and that's how I'm going to end this video. This passage from the Necronomicon can be found in H.P. Lovecraft's work, the short story, The Dunwich Horror. Nor is it to be thought that man is either the oldest or the last of earth's masters, or that the common bulk of life and substance walks alone. The old ones were, the old ones are, and the old ones shall be. Not in the spaces we know, but between them, they walk serene and primal, undimensioned, and to us unseen. Yog-Sothoth knows the gate. Yog-Sothoth is the gate. Yog-Sothoth is the key and the guardian of the gate. Past, present, future, all are one in Yog-Sothoth. He knows where the old ones broke through of old and where they shall break through again. He knows where they had trod earth's fields and where they still tread them, and why no one can behold them as they tread. By their smell can men sometimes know them near, but of their substance can no man know, saving only in the features of those they have begotten on mankind, and of those are there many sorts, differing in likeness from man's truest eidolon to that shape without sight or substance which is them. They walk unseen in foul and lonely places where the words have been spoken and the rites howled through at their seasons. The wind gibbers with their voices, and the earth mutters with their consciousness. They bend the forest and crush the city, yet may not forest or city behold the hand that smites. Kadath in the cold waste hath known them, and what man knows Kadath? The ice desert of the south and the sunken isles of ocean hold stones whereon their seal is engraved, but who hath seen the deep frozen city, or the sealed tower long garlanded with seaweed and barnacles? Great Cthulhu is their cousin, yet can he spy them only dimly. Ai Shub-Niggurath, as a foulness shall ye know them. Their hand is at your throats, yet ye see them not, and their habitation is even one with your guarded threshold. Yog-Sothoth is the key to the gate, whereby the spheres meet. Man rules now where they ruled once, they shall soon rule where man rules now. After summer is winter, after winter summer, they wait patient and potent, for here shall they reign again.